There's a special kind of quiet that hits after someone you love tells you you're worthless. It's not empty, it's heavy. It's the sound of a door slamming shut on the future you thought you were going to have. For me, that silence hit me right on my 18th birthday. Standing in the driveway of my childhood home, with a duffel bag at my feet that I didn't even pack. The family had decided I was a failure. No plan, no prospects, nothing. Just a huge disappointment. They thought they knew exactly how my story was going to end. And you know what? They were kind of right. It did end in a house. The only difference is, it's my house. And they're the ones who have to ask me for the keys. The bottom, my failure at 1818, is supposed to feel like a starting line. For me, it felt like the end. It wasn't just one thing, but this slow, crushing avalanche of expectations that I just couldn't meet. My grades were a complete disaster. While my friends were getting acceptance letters from colleges, I was collecting rejections like they were baseball cards. My report card wasn't just a list of bad grades. It felt like a formal declaration of my own inadequacy. And my parents weren't mad in the way you might think. There was no yelling or screaming. It was worse. It was this quiet, heavy disappointment that just settled over our house like a permanent fog. Every single conversation was soaked in it. What are you going to do with your life? This wasn't a real question, it was an accusation. It meant you're doing nothing and you're becoming nothing. My dad, a guy who measured a man's worth in job titles and promotions, could barely even look at me. He saw a dead-end street. It's a bad investment. My mom, she just sighed. A lot. Her sighs were the soundtrack to my failure, filled with all the dreams she had for me just evaporating. The final nail in the coffin came at a family get-together. A few weeks after my birthday, my uncle, probably thinking he was being helpful, asked me about my plans in front of everybody. I mumbled something about taking time to figure things out. He laughed. Not a nice laugh. He looked right at my dad and said, loud enough for the whole room to hear, "Don't worry, every family's got one. He'll figure out how to flip burgers eventually." Nobody said a word to defend me. Not my dad, not my mom. They just sort of nodded. And in that moment, the label wasn't just in my head. Anymore, it was branded on me. Failure. I could feel it on my skin. I went from being their son to being their problem. So getting kicked out wasn't some big dramatic fight. It was quiet. It was their logical next step. I wasn't contributing. I had no plan they approved of. So I was a drain on resources. My dad sat me down and explained it to me like I was a bad business deal. "It's time you learned to stand on your own 2 feet," he said. But his eyes said, "It's time for you to stop being my problem." He handed me $100 and the number of a cousin 2 hours away who might have a couch I could crash on. That walk down the driveway was devastating. It's one thing to feel like you're failing, but it's another to have the people who are supposed to have your back no matter what be the ones to confirm it. The shame was a physical weight. It was hard to breathe, standing there watching that front door close. I felt completely and totally alone. The world was huge and terrifying. And I'd just been tossed into it with nothing but a label I never asked for and $100 that felt more like severance pay than a helping hand. The spark, the decision to change. For the first few weeks, I basically fell apart. I was sleeping on my cousin's lumpy couch that smelled like stale chips and regret. I spent my days just replaying every disappointed look, every harsh word. Was just drifting, and honestly, I was proving them right. I was becoming the failure they said I was. The moment that changed everything wasn't some grand epiphany. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and I was down to my last $4. Starving. I walked into a convenience store and I was just staring at the instant noodles, trying to figure out if I could afford 2 packs. And as I'm standing there, this older guy in a janitor's uniform comes in. He looked exhausted. He bought a single, sad-looking hot dog and a lottery ticket. He looked over at me, saw the noodles in my hand, and gave me this tired smile. "Hoping for a lucky break?" he asked. I don't know why, but that just shattered me. I saw my entire future in that guy. Not in the hard work. There's dignity in that. But in his eyes, he was leaving his life up to chance, up to a lottery ticket. And I realized that's exactly what I was doing. My family had written a script for my life, and I was just passively living it out, waiting for something to happen to me. For the first time, anger just burned through all the shame, not just at them, but at myself. I walked out of that store without the noodles. I was still hungry, but now it was a different kind of hunger. Was a hunger for control. That night, I went to a 24-hour library. I didn't have a computer, just a smartphone with a cracked screen. I got on their Wi-Fi and just started searching. I didn't even know what I was looking for. I think I literally typed how to not be a failure. And somewhere in all that internet chaos, I found articles about personal finance, about Fire Financial, independence, retire early. It was like learning a new language. Assets, liabilities, compounding interest. I had no idea what any of it meant. But the core idea was so simple and so powerful. You can build your own life brick by brick. Money wasn't just for spending. It was a tool. The first thing I did was so small, it was almost stupid. I took a piece of printer paper and I wrote down every single cent I'd spent that week. It was a pathetic list, but it was real. It was the first time I'd ever actually looked my life in the face. That was my first brick. It was small and ugly, but I laid it myself. That was the shift. I stopped being the kid who got kicked out and started being the guy who left. My past was a data point, not my destination. And I decided, sitting in that library at 3 a.m., that I was done waiting. I was going to start building. The grind building from zero the next 2 years were not glamorous. It was a slow, painful, monotonous grind. It wasn't about big victories. It was about thousands of tiny choices I made every single day. First, I got a job. Any job. I ended up with 2. From 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., I was stocking shelves at a grocery store. From 4 p.m. to 11 p.m., I was washing dishes at a diner, living in a cloud of steam and grease. I rented a tiny room in a house with 3 other guys. It was basically a closet. Wake up, work, work, sleep. That was my life. That first paycheck felt like $1 million. And the urge to just go buy something to feel normal for a second was massive. This is where the real work started. I had to master delayed gratification. That's a nice way of saying you have to get comfortable with sucking it up. It meant saying no to everything. My coworkers would go out for a beer. I'd go home to my closet and eat rice and beans. It meant my only entertainment was free library books. Every time I was about to spend $1, I'd ask, is this for comfort now or for my goal later? I had to choose the goal every time. Then I got super clear on my financial goals. Get rich is useless. I needed targets. I used a beat-up notebook, build a $1,000 emergency fund, pay back the $500. I borrowed from my cousin, saved $10,000 for ... something, an investment. Having it written down made it real. It was a plan. The last piece of the puzzle was surrounding myself with winners, which was tough since I was completely alone. So my mentors became podcasts and books. While I was stocking shelves, I always had one earbud in, listening to financial experts, The Simple Path to Wealth, The Millionaire Next Door, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I was reprogramming my brain from what my family taught me that a job is for spending money. These new voices taught me a job is a tool to generate capital. That was a game changer. My budget was ruthless. I used a notebook, not a fancy app. Every dollar had a job. I followed a strict 70-10-20th rule, 70% for needs, 10% for wants, and 20% straight to savings. Eventually, I pushed that savings rate to 30%, then 40%. The gap between what I earned and what I spent was the sound of freedom. Building that first $1,000 emergency fund was the hardest part. It took me almost 4 months. A few times I had to dip into it for a surprise bill, and each time felt like a punch to the gut. But having that little buffer, that small wall between me and total disaster, was the first time I ever felt secure. The 2 jobs weren't enough. On my one day off, I started a side hustle. I went on Craigslist and did anything. Moving furniture, mowing lawns, cleaning gutters. It was brutal, physical work. I remember hauling a fridge down 3 flights of stairs in July for $50, thinking, this is the price. This wasn't that cool hustle culture you see on Instagram. This was pure exhaustion and isolation. I had no balance. But I wasn't looking for balance. I was looking for escape velocity. I had to burn an insane amount of fuel to break free of my past. I knew it wouldn't last forever, but with every dollar I saved, the voice in my head calling me a failure got a little bit quieter. The ladder from saving to investing for that first year, my whole strategy was defense. It was about surviving, but saving alone wasn't going to cut it. I was running on a treadmill and I needed an escalator. The move from saver to investor was the next step, and honestly, it was terrifying. The library became my real university. I learned about taxes, credit, and debt. My family always said all debt is bad, but I was learning that just wasn't true. Some debt is a tool. My first step was getting a secured credit card. I had to put down a $200 deposit just to get a $200 credit limit. It felt ridiculous, but I treated that card like gold. I'd buy gas once a month and pay it off in full the second the statement hit. Slowly, my credit score started to grow. That little number was a key that would unlock my future. The stock market felt like a casino. The idea of putting my hard-earned money into it made me sick. But I kept reading about compounding interest, how money could make money for you while you slept. I finally took the plunge with low-cost index funds. The idea is simple. Instead of trying to pick winning stocks, you just buy a tiny piece of the whole market. I opened a brokerage account online, a process that took 3 nights of pure anxiety to finish. I'll never forget it. I transferred $500 and typed in the ticker symbol for a total stock market fund. My finger hovered over the buy button. For what felt like an hour, my heart was pounding. It felt like lighting money on fire. I clicked it, and nothing happened. The world didn't end. I just owned a few shares of something. Checked it the next day and it was down $2. Panic. I knew it. But I forced myself to remember, this is a long game, so I made a rule. I automated it. Every 2 weeks, right after I got paid, money went into that fund. $100 at first, then $200. Rain or shine, market up or down. I stopped checking it every day. Then I started checking it only once a month. And slowly, like magic, it started to grow. It wasn't just my money anymore. The money itself was working. That was the most motivating feeling in the world. Proof that the system could work for me. Section 5. The goal, becoming a landlord. Stock market was cool, but it was just numbers on a screen. I wanted something real. That's when I locked onto my big goal, real estate. Owning a physical piece of the earth that could give someone shelter and make me money, that was the new obsession. Saving for a down payment was the final boss battle. My frugality went to a whole new level. I moved into an even cheaper, damper basement room. I lived on oatmeal, eggs, and rice. I got a 3rd job delivering pizzas. I sold my clunker car and biked everywhere, even in the winter. My life was just a math problem. A $5 coffee wasn't just $5. It was $5 that wasn't growing for my future. I wasn't deprived. I was investing. It took almost 3 years of that relentless grind. There were so many times I wanted to quit. But then I'd remember that front door closing, that failure label. And I'd just keep going. With a down payment saved and a good credit score, I started. Hunting and reality hit me like a truck. Everything was so expensive. Then I learned about house hacking. You buy a multifamily property, like a duplex, live in one unit, and the tenants in the other unit pay your mortgage. It was brilliant. I focused on up-and-coming neighborhoods and properties that needed work. I also researched first-time homebuyer programs like FHA loans, which let you buy with a much smaller down payment. The paperwork was a monster, but I tackled it. After 6 months and 4 failed offers, I found it. A beat-up duplex, but the numbers worked. If I lived in this small upstairs unit, the rent from downstairs would cover the entire mortgage, taxes, and insurance. Getting the loan was one of the most stressful weeks of my life. But my 2 years of steady jobs, my credit score, and my down payment were all the proof they needed. I'll never forget the day I closed. Sitting in that lawyer's office, my hand was shaking, signing all those pages. With every signature, I felt the weight of the last 5 years, the greasy dishes, the lonely nights, the constant saying no, all leading to this moment. The lawyer slid the keys across the table. They felt impossibly heavy. I drove to the house, walked up to the door, and unlocked it. I stepped inside the dusty, empty apartment. It wasn't a palace, but it was mine. I had gone from homeless to homeowner, from a liability to a landlord. The voice that called me a failure was finally silent. The twist, now I'm their landlord life, has a pretty twisted sense of humor. The first year of being a landlord was great. I fixed up my apartment, got a good tenant for downstairs, and for the first time, my housing was free. All the money I earned was just piling up. The twist came on a random Tuesday. I got an email application for the downstairs unit after my first tenant moved out. I didn't recognize the name at first, but then I saw it. Under previous landlord, my father's name was listed. My blood went cold. I scrolled back up. The applicant was my aunt, uncle's wife. It's the same uncle who told everyone I'd end up flipping burgers. I just stared at the screen. A wave of emotions hit me. Revenge, shock, vindication. I read the application again. They were downsizing. My uncle had lost his job a year ago, and they'd burned through their savings trying to keep up appearances. They sold their house, and now they had applied to rent from the failure they wrote off. My first impulse was to just delete the email. No way. Why should I help them? But then the disciplined part of me, the part I'd spent 5 years building, took over. This was a business decision. Had to separate the emotion from the facts, and the facts were their application was solid. Their income met the requirements. As a landlord, they were qualified. I did something the 18-year-old me never could have. I was professional. I called the number. My aunt answered, completely oblivious. I introduced myself, just my first name, and as the owner of the property. There was just dead silence on the other end. Double quotes, ... Alex, she finally said. Is that you? The conversation was so awkward. I walked her through the process like she was a total stranger. Rent, security deposit, lease terms. I could hear my uncle whispering in the background. A week later, they came over to sign the lease. It was the most surreal moment of my life. My uncle, the guy who made fun of me, sat at my kitchen tabbouleh table I bought with money from working 3 jobs. He couldn't make eye contact. He just stared at the papers. My aunt tried to make small talk, but it just hung in the air. They signed. My uncle pushed the check for the security deposit and first month's rent across the table. His hand was shaking. I didn't gloat. I didn't say, I told you so. I didn't have to. The power dynamic had completely flipped, not because of anger, but because of quiet, relentless work. I was their landlord. If this story connects with you, if you've ever felt underestimated, hit that subscribe button and join the community. We're all on a journey to prove that our past doesn't define our future. The work we put in today does. Okay, and I want to hear from you, what's the biggest wall you're trying to climb right now? Drop it in the comments. Reading each other's stories is a reminder that none of us are in this grind alone. Looking back, that journey from the driveway to this duplex feels impossible, but it wasn't one giant leap. It was 10,000 tiny steps. It was choosing to read a book instead of watching a movie, choosing to save $1 instead of spending. It was choosing to believe in myself when no one else would. Financial independence isn't about getting rich overnight. It's about taking back control. It's a slow process of building a life that can handle the storms that will definitely come. Your starting point is not your destiny. Plenty of young adults don't become independent overnight, and that's okay. The path is gradual, and you'll have setbacks. The key is to just start. The most ironic part? In a way, my family gave me a gift. Their doubt was the fuel I needed. Being called a failure forged a discipline in me that I never knew I had. They said they wanted me to stand on my own 2 feet. Well, I did. So firmly that I now own the ground they stand on. Your future isn't a story someone else writes for you. It's a story you write every single day, with the choices you make and the work you put in. It's written in the early mornings and the late nights. It's written in the sacrifices nobody sees. So go out there, write a story nobody expects. Go write your story.